Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, Rodney. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm peachy. I'm well relaxed after a nice Labor Day. I
Yeah, nice.
actually,
Me too.
I know, did you go golfing?
You know I did.
Oh,
I actually went to a great place yesterday in Bowling Green, Kentucky, Old Stone Golf Club or the club at Old Stone
yeah.
in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Yeah, it was awesome. A good buddy of mine invited me and my son up there. We went up there and had a great time.
No kidding.
Yeah,
So you drive to,
excellent.
hey, I get it.
It's well, it was only like 70 miles from my house, and I'm on the other side of Nashville from Kentucky, right? So
Right.
it's only like 40 miles from Nashville, but so it ain't too
Yeah.
bad.
Well, it's surprised. I know that I've sold a lot of houses up like in Portland, and it took me longer to get off the highway to Portland than it did to get to the Kentucky state border. I mean, once you turn right, that's when the drive begins. At least that's the way it felt. But
Yeah,
so,
it was this club is like 3 miles or 2 miles off the interstate. I mean, it's perfect.
oh,
It's
that
really
sounds.
cool.
Oh, I'm glad you.
Yeah.
I have to try golfing again one of these days, but not today. So, welcome back, everybody. If you're just watching this on a replay, my name is Andy Elliott. I'm a realtor here in Williamson County. This is Rodney Wilds on my right, your right, my left, whatever, with F&M Mortgage here in Brentwood, Tennessee. And this isn't about selling you houses or giving you loans. We're just really offering information on a market that we happen to be familiar with. We try to be general in scope. So wherever you're tuning in from, we want to be able to touch on something that'll be interesting to you. It's not just the Nashville area that we're trying to focus on. We're trying to talk about the market in general. So what we're going to start doing every week is we're going to start the show off with where mortgages are, because everybody has the same question: how much are rates? What does it mean to me? I mean, because that's what it boils down to. And so Rodney is kind enough to have some really good information about what rates are, what they mean, things like that. And he's going to start off every week um, with that. So let me get this technically going here, and we'll do this. All right, hang on, we're going to do this. Unlock. Good. Blink. Look at that. Look at that. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, today, if Andy, you're sharing the screen there from our friends at MBS Highway, who gives us incredible information on what the market updated live minute to minute feeds here. Um, the if you're wanting the interest rates to go up, you're having a great day today. As you can see here, it's went up 75 basis points from the start of the day. Uh, Very early this morning, they started contacting us, telling us the rates are getting worse, and to lock in your interest rate if you're currently doing that right now. So if you're hearing this and you're floating your rate, uh, you know today's a good day to lock. Yeah, they really feel like there's on this chart here. Um, the floor of support has been broken through, as they've told us, and what that means is there's no floor that it's bouncing off of. So it could potentially just get worse right now until further notice. Um, you see the S&P 500 is down, and in the U.S. Treasury, it's up 11 basis points, which that's a good. The 10-year Treasury runs pretty parallel with our mortgage rates. People think it's the interest rate that the Fed changes all the time. It's really not. The 10-year Treasury is more a guide for us than that special funds rate or the Fed funds rate that they change all the time. And lastly, I'll share with you, Andy. If we have folks across the country that have questions about their area, we can go in here and pick. Angie from California, she's on our show a lot. We can look at their yearly appreciation from year to year from and that's in percent change. So
That's
we can
pretty
do that
interesting.
pretty much anywhere across the country, Tennessee, wherever. So
So if somebody's watching this, um, then bear with me a second here. And left and right. Did that wrong. There we go. So what you're saying, Rodney, is if somebody's watching this and they have a question, they can actually, because we can see these questions on the chat anytime. I
mhm.
can see these 24/7. So if somebody's watching this on replay and has a question about rates in their state, they can ask in our chat, and you can tell them what that is. You know, can give them feedback on that.
Yeah, and these are, the rate section is for anywhere in the country right now. There's no, like rates aren't state specific. That's the mortgage-backed security through
Right.
as it's reporting with like the stock exchange, right? Um, but the home price, the change in state home prices,
Right.
things like that, if they're kind of wondering, what happened last few months, or what happened 10 years ago, it's got a good, yeah, we can look it up and see if we can help them with their question about their change in their house price over the last several years.
Excellent, excellent. So, anybody again that's watching this as a replay, you can count on that kind of information, that value, at the top of our show every Tuesday at 1 o'clock by Rodney. And Rodney, that's really good stuff. I really appreciate that. Did you want to touch on some news here?
Oh, let's do it.
Okay. Did you read recently that the there are several cities in the I lost my train of thought on that. Um, the prices are actually going to decline in 5 cities. They're projecting 5 cities, and one of those, of course, one of them is Austin, right? The number one hottest city. What they say is the hottest city, the hottest cities during the pandemic and this sales cycle are going to be the ones that are hit the hardest with price reductions.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that anything's collapsing. It just means that they were artificially, I have to say, artificially inflated. You know, it wasn't a market-driven thing, and it was a person-driven thing. I guess is that different? I don't know. But you had Austin and Nashville and Tampa, and there was another one, another city, the top five of the hottest city. They called Zoom cities, and so those Zoom cities that are really hot and exploded, they're expecting those to take a hit as prices normalize. I'm going to say, and sadly enough, and I'm getting ready to do a video on that this week. Is Nashville is one of the Zoom cities that's been affected by the heat. You know, we're in its city for quite a while, right?
Hmm.
And so that's what's so that's what we. I'm just saying it's a caution, you know, because people ask, you know, what's going to happen. You can't believe everything that you read, certainly, but sometimes things make sense. So I caught that in the news. I wonder if that was in the. We'll look something up while you talk to the folks.
Well, that was yeah. I didn't see that one, and it would make sense, when somebody says, "Well, the hottest market should see the fastest decline," um, and we're seeing it. I mean, I don't know I don't know what they're going to call a decline, but we're seeing more days on the market.
Yep.
We're seeing, seller concessions. We're seeing sellers take contingencies. We're seeing people reduce their price, in MLS a couple times before it sells. I have a couple builders in outlying areas that have a lot of existing inventory. I even heard of one that said he hadn't wrote a contract in 45 days, and that's in the first time home buyer range.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a little concerning. I'm like, they've been on the sidelines for a long time. First time home buyers is I don't know. They're just paying the price right now with these high rates.
They really are. They really are. I want to find this real quick. Um, that's all right. That's all right. I should have been ready. I wasn't ready. So, what we wanted to touch base, I promise we're going to contingencies. We're going to talk about
Contingencies, yes.
contingencies today.
We've been working on it for 2 weeks.
I uh, I dropped the ball, and but today I am ready. So so here's how. And Rodney, just you have to interrupt me because once I get on a roll, I get sort of steam roller like
Well,
Um,
I'll interrupt you right before you get started. Is it okay? Is it inappropriate if like I take a drink out of this before, on camera?
do not drink on camera. It's
Okay.
like rude.
I thought it was. I was wanting to double check.
Sometimes I need to get moistened up. Anyway, so we're going to talk about contingencies, of course, and I know that Rodney has a great understanding of this, but contingencies, for the most part, is really to the realtor's domain. So if it, I mean, wouldn't you agree, Rodney? Probably.
100%, yeah, 100% your domain. You made a bold statement by saying I understand them.
Well, I know you know one of them, that financial contingency, but we'll get to that.
Yes.
But here's what I want to say about contingencies. A contingency is a condition that must be met in order for a contract to move forward to closing. That's what it is. In other words, it's like if this, then that. If, for example, Mr. Seller, if you'll fix the roof, then I'll buy your house. That's what a contingency is. And if a contingency doesn't clear, then the contract is blocked and it doesn't move forward. But there, it's way more complicated. I mean, it's simple in its scope. A contingency stands in the way of a closing, but there's subtleties to that, and that's what I want to get to uh, on this live stream today. Sorry, I drank that water. See what I get for that? That's what I get. For a buyer, a contingency, when you're writing an offer, a contingency is the only thing that stands between you and a house with serious problems. And what I mean is, for example, and we'll go through it, an inspection contingency gives you the right and the ability to check the house as thoroughly as you need to feel good about the house, to go to purchase it. You can go through it to whatever degree you want. Home inspection is really not limited. You can get all kinds of stuff. We're going to go through that in a minute. But it's the one thing that stands between you and getting a bad house. And on the other hand, though, it also is a major roadblock for the seller being comfortable. The reason I bring all that up is we're going to talk about what's been happening this last couple of years and why waived inspections changed the rules. It changed the rules. On the other hand, a contingency, we're going to touch on this. This is a really good one. On the other hand, a contingency isn't just a mechanism. It isn't a way to get out of a contract. And let me clarify, it is, but it's not. And if it's done without care, if the seller gets upset enough, lawsuits can come. And what I mean is, sometimes people will try to use a contingency to get out of a contract when they just want out. They got cold feet or whatever. There's a clause in every contract called in good faith. And that's what comes into question if somebody wants to bail for honestly no good reason other than they got scared. So we'll cover all that in a minute. Probably won't cover any more than that. But anyway, so for the last couple of years, homes were being bought with contingencies being waived so buyers could win the contract. Did you see that happening quite a bit, Rodney?
Yes, where everything was waived. If you
Everything.
bought a house, you waived your, most of the time it was financial contingency,
Mm-hmm.
appraisal,
Mm-hmm.
um, inspection period,
Mm-hmm.
all inspections
Mm-hmm.
as is. I mean, everything was waived. And not to be funny, but we seen seller or buyers offering apple pies, a bottle of whiskey, things like this in the contract. It's like it was really, the tide had really turned for the seller, in the seller
Good
space.
Lord. Apple pie and whiskey. I have to say yes to that one. I like that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously if you're putting that in there, you're pretty proud of your apple pie recipe. I can guarantee you it wasn't somebody that was going to go pick it up from Publix or Kroger or Publix or something. They was proud of their apple pie recipe.
You show up with a Costco apple pie and they throw it on the floor.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So people are, that's great. So people were waiving contracts left and right. Now, here's something that I read. I don't know how to verify this, but I heard upwards of 70% of the people that bought homes by waiving all their contingency have some level of dissatisfaction with their purchase. Doesn't mean they hate the house, doesn't mean they don't wish they didn't go through with it, but it does say to go through a contract without any being able to even check things out made people really uncomfortable. And I would say in some cases they regretted the purchase of the home. I'm not saying 70%, but it's a relatively high number. People were really not happy about that. And like it was like Rodney made a joke last week. There were sellers that were rejecting contracts because people wanted to see the house.
Yeah,
And when can we see it? Well, you can't see it. It's
we
you
yeah we
write the
had one.
contract.
It wasn't a joke. We had a deal where if you had to put in an offer to purchase a house if you wanted to see it. That was the only way you was going to see it is if you had a contract. Now, your contract at that time, your contract of being accepted was pretty low. There's probably going to be 30 or 40 offers. So, I mean, it
Yeah.
was just a way of keeping foot traffic out of the seller's house. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, we're just trying to sell the house. But we don't want to dirty the carpet,
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, but that was a couple of years ago, and I'm going to tell you, those days are gone. The market's cooled. Contingencies are back, and they're back not with a vengeance, but well, they're back with a vengeance. And for anybody that's in the market that's been trying to get a house, has seen a change happen since I'm going to say March, April, May is when it started to really change, and now into June, July, August, it's shifted tremendously to where now when somebody puts in an offer, they're asking for stuff plus negotiating the price. And that is a big deal because everybody was up in arms about prices can't go this high forever, right? And you can't. When is it ever going to cool off? Well, you know what? Here we are. And so, so then now the other side is going, when is it going to heat up again? They're worried about the prices collapsing. So it's either one or the other. Can we just meet in the middle?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so here we go. And if I miss something, Rodney, I'm watching for your hand signals because I'm about ready to go on a roll here. The contingencies that are available, and there's a bunch of them, but the first one is a home inspection contingency. What that means is, in general, a person comes in and looks at your home, and I say this with all deference and respect to home inspectors. They're jack of all trades, but masters of none. They're not a specialist in anything other than giving you an overview of your house. They can tell you if the roof is leaking. They can't tell you necessarily how to fix it. They can tell you if your plumbing's leaking. They can tell you what is so common is if your outlets are reversed. I don't know why that matters, but I get those on every inspection report. Polarity reversed for the what's up with that? Doesn't bother my TV. But they can tell you if the flooring is bad, but they can't tell you why. They can tell you if there's things going on in the basement. They can't tell you why. But the whole idea of a home inspection is that you can get from roof to crawl space an idea of the condition of the home, and the home inspector's job, I see it as one thing. It's sending up red flags, warning signs that something might need further investigation. Does that sound right to you, Rodney?
Yes, I mean, I always term it is that they're there to find out what's wrong with the house. I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to find out the littlest things and hopefully to the biggest things, whatever's wrong with it. Um,
Yeah.
no house is perfect, right? So yes, they're when you get 9 pages of a home inspection, yeah, you better be ready to find out everything that's wrong with that house. I mean, but 90% of it or 95% of it, sometimes 100 is just cosmetic little
Yep.
fixes.
Yeah.
Um, it's when you find the electrical, plumbing, or a big issue that you're like, "Whoo, you know, I'm
Yeah.
glad I said yes."
Yeah. That's exactly right. And Roddy, you make a really good point too, because when I get inspections, the guy I use, they're usually dependent on the size of the house, but generally speaking, they're 35 to 60 pages is what they can be. And he
Yeah,
puts together a summary of the things that you probably should pay attention to, but then goes into a full out list with everything. The house is made out of wood. It's got, I mean, it labels everything. And so when I try to prep a buyer, if they're not used to it, I tell them, look, an inspection's going to come and it's going to look like a novel to you. And you're going to think everything in the world is wrong with this house. That's not what the inspection is about. It's also about identifying breaker boxes and switches and shut-off valves, and it's about identifying a lot of stuff so that you can use that as a reference after you move in to find these things. So just because it's a long-winded thing, like myself can be, it doesn't mean that it's a bad situation. But when a red flag is sent up, for example, if um, okay, let's say the inspector finds a leak in a closet on an upstairs on the second floor of a house, just a little bit of a leak. You might have to have that checked out further because it could end up being an evaporator or a condenser for an AC unit that's upstairs that's leaking because they have pans and they can overflow and all that kind of stuff. Whatever it is that they find, if you want to get to the deeper concern, you have to hire a second person. In other words, a home inspector is going to find, in general, things to be looked at. HVAC is 12 years old. Is it working? Yes. Does it need to be inspected? By an HVAC guy, probably, if that's what you need, because generally they work 15, 20 years. But that's what general home inspection is about, is just finding those red flags to send you on other, like Rodney said, more deeper problems, because you don't want, if you see a foundation crack, you don't want that. I mean,
right.
of all the things that cause the most concern or the hardest to fix that in my experience, there's probably others, but the more difficult things are foundation, for example. So then they're going to be looking at, sorry, um, they're going to be looking at the mechanics of the water heater. They're going to be looking at the electrical panel. If you've got an older house, like say built in the 50s or 60s, they're going to look at, because sometimes they have aluminum wiring, and I don't know actually what that means, but every time I hear him say there's aluminum wiring, I've picked up the vibe that aluminum probably isn't what I'm looking for. So for older homes, they're going to be able to look at the breaker boxes, and they've found fuses like the Coke bottle top ones, right? Instead of the,
Hmm. The
so they
glass fuse, yeah,
say that again.
I think
Yes,
they're glass. Yeah,
yeah, glass fuse. That's right. And so when you find that, that's what you're looking for. But the reason I'm kind of pounding on this, it's not the home inspector's job to say that's bad. If he finds
right.
those kinds of fuses, it's your responsibility to find an electrician to come in and say he was right. That's bad. And so the next type of appraisal is going to be the financial contingency. Now, Rodney, of course, is going to know this, and I think that I have this right, reasonably certain. In Tennessee, a financial contingency lasts until closing day. Is that correct?
Yes, our usually our financial contingencies, correct. The financial well, everything expires with your contract date. So
Right.
yes, the financial contingency would expire whenever the contract expired.
But somebody could sit down, and sounds scary because this is the only contingency that doesn't run out except for, like Rodney said, with expiration of the closing date or the contract date. You can be going to closing and something is discovered on a financial side and not be able to close. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Sure. If you,
Go
I
out and
mean,
buy a car.
or quit their job, somebody could quit, think it
Oh
not
yeah.
making a difference. And that happens. You wouldn't believe how many times that happens. People do that. Oh, I didn't think it mattered. I'm like, yeah, it does matter. So
Oh,
yeah, that
really?
so we of course if they break if they disqualify themselves from you know a loan, then that would break their financial. That would make it they're not financial. They can't get a loan.
Got it. Yeah. And it's my understanding that Tennessee is, maybe it's not unique in that. I think it's probably it's a lender decision, and it's got to be. It's a good one. But that's the only one that you really need the signature on the paper to close that house.
Yeah,
The,
and what's in there now? I thought they added a couple years ago for us in Tennessee um, that they had to start the process within 7 days of the binding contract, and they have to start the loan application. Isn't that right? And
yeah,
doesn't
5 days, right? Yeah.
and then it gives a little bit of a protection so they don't wait too long for that process to get it started and get it going so you can uncover stuff like that as fast as
Right.
you
And
can.
right. And I'm not saying um, that somebody hasn't been pre-approved or that they're not good borrowers. I'm not saying any of that. I
Right,
mean, I'm going to
just when it
assume
expires.
I'm going to assume that they've been pre-qualified or I mean pre-approved in a real way, verified and good to go. But something happens out of their
Yeah,
control that changes the scenario. That's all.
100%. Yeah,
They're moving forward in good faith, and then the employer calls up, like you said, something happens, and you know what? I've never had that happen, but I know it can. So the next, that really is. Just the thought of that makes me.
hey, while you're recovering from that thought, let me you talked about home inspections. I would like to just to add that you know that was a very good point about the home inspections. And from the lender perspective, we don't require them. Highly recommend them, but we don't require them. So what we do though is I don't want people to think their appraisal is part of this process, because the appraisal would just be going to tell you the basically what the value is compared to some of the comps that have sold around in that neighborhood. Okay. So it might give some general information about the condition, but the appraisal is basically an opinion of value, not necessarily about condition. So
Right.
don't think if you're a buyer, you're going to get great information regarding the condition of the property. Um, you need a home inspection for that.
Got, you're not going to get any indicators from the appraisal, right? Then, so let's jump into appraisals for just a second. Then, appraisals, I believe, are mischaracterized as an actual value of a house. The value of a house is determined by what a seller will sell for and a buyer will buy for. That is the meeting of the minds in the agreement. That's the actual value of a home. I don't care what your description is beyond that. That's the bottom line. What somebody will sell for, what somebody is willing to pay, meeting of the minds, that's the value. And so when you have a seller, and I've had this far too many times, and regardless of the market changing so much, in terms of price opinions from, well, prices are just skyrocketing, that a seller will say, well, I had an appraisal and they said my house is worth X. That doesn't mean anything. I had an appraisal when I got it refinanced. That doesn't mean anything.
Mhm.
It's a good ballpark. You can use it for that. but you can't look at an appraisal as that's what we're going to set the listing price as, because I've seen appraisals come in 60, 80, $100,000 difference on the bigger properties. They can come in different. So what Ruddy's talking about is the appraisal. If you're getting a loan, it's a requirement for I mean, the lender is going to use the house for collateral when you close. You probably know you don't actually own the house. You just own the note, the responsibility to pay back the thing. And the appraisal is used to make sure that the value is there so that the collateral stands. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
And Fannie Mae's gathering and has been gathering so much data over the past several years. Like when I submit an appraisal to Fannie Mae, every comp that is used is, in their database now. And think about all the appraisals over the last several years. So you get to the point where you get a really well qualified buyer that comes in, they're putting a decent down payment down. You could see what's called a Fannie Mae waiver, or where they waive the appraisal altogether. Like
Mm-hmm.
if Fannie Mae says, I have enough information on this house where it's worth 600,000, I'm not requiring an appraisal. And so we go to the customer and say, hey, do you want one? The system says you don't need one. It sees the value as really good, and give them an option. Now, I agree with you 100% that the value is, but what comes up between the seller and the buyer, that is the value. However, the wrench in that plan is, if you're getting a loan, Fannie Mae says the value is going to be the lesser of the appraised value or the sales price. So
Mm-hmm.
that's when you could get tricked. If you're getting a loan, Fannie Mae's guides say you have to go by the lesser of the sales price or the appraised value.
That's interesting. And that leads us into the reason we were having appraisal gap problems last year, because
Mm-hmm.
buyer and seller were agreeing to clearly an overpriced home.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Regardless of what the comps in neighborhood, that's really good. Um, so then the final thing on the appraisal is, and I don't know. There used to be this, I want to say old wives' tale, but that's not PC. There used to be this thing that people would say about appraisals being different for FHA, VA, and conventional. Is it essentially all the same appraisal?
It's the same appraiser. Think about that. When people that has been a myth in our area forever. Oh, I don't want to do an FHA.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, big time.
Now I'm going to separate, and first I'm going to give my opinion. Okay, I'm going to take VA out of this equation. Okay, when I'm talking about when I'm talking about appraisals, FHA and VA, FHA and conventional, those are the ones I'm considering. It's the same appraiser. They have a little bit different guidelines. I think on the FHA, a couple of the guidelines may be the appraiser has to access the crawl space and see all four corners of the crawl space, the attic, and take pictures of that and include those. And if he sees any immediate safety issues, or like a broken window. And safety issues could be something like a missing handrail. I see that a bunch. Something crazy on the sidewalk where you got like a 3-inch gap, maybe a trip hazard, or I've seen people tear off decks at the back of the house where it's only a 2 or 3 step down and they don't replace it with anything. And I'm like, you open up the door and there's like a 4-foot jump. That's great for your 5-year-old, right? But
Yeah.
buying the house, Fannie or FHA will probably have a problem with that, and they'll say, "Hey, just get that fixed," but before closing. So, but there's no value difference. That's the same appraiser going out there. There's, like I said, those are the main differences. Like if they see a conventional is always known as is, but if there's safety, like if you see electrical issue, an appraiser is going to ask for that to be fixed on Fannie Mae.
Right.
They're going to ask for any safety hazard to be fixed, and that's a little bit like the FHA. Um, FHA just doesn't want you to get in a house and have a bunch of expenses within the first several years of the house.
Yeah. And the way that we used to handle that, and I will start to handle it again, probably not as um, regularly, but back in the 2010s, when we were selling houses that were really in a lot of them in tragic condition because they were foreclosures, short sales, whatever the case was, we would tell people who were willing to go through the process of the home inspection that this is just the first layer of it, because when we were getting appraisals back then, and this is what you're talking about, Rodney, was the subject twos. So
Mm-hmm.
when we would go under contract, we get through the inspection period, and I'd tell them if the appraiser comes up with a subject two, well, then the seller has to fix that before they can sell it. So it's not on you, but it's up to them to fix it. So your back deck story, they'd give you value for the house subject to that back deck being replaced,
Exactly.
and that always put people's mind at ease, but it made it so that, I always made sure that the listing agent knew that too. Generally, they were people that did a lot of short sales, so they knew what was coming. Let me
Hey,
see.
can I ask you one question?
Please.
I've always been confused about this, and just wanting to know when somebody's under contract and you've got a contingency you're removing or adding. Does that ever reopen negotiations? Meaning, like, let's say that you get your home inspection back, and the seller had in there $500 maximum for repairs, and you come up and you have 10,000. Like, let's say the inspection reveals something that the buyer wants fixed, and you say, well, I think it's appropriate if we ask for $10,000 off the sales price. When you go back, does that reopen negotiations to where they can now, like, you ask for that, could they counter and say, I am no longer selling you the house, and so I reject your
Absolutely.
offer?
That's a great question. The way that works is, sorry, during the course of an inspection negotiation in Tennessee, they do it. They've done a fabulous job. They do an inspection. It's called a repair replace proposal, and that's where I propose to you what you take care of, and then you'll counter back what you agree to take care of. If we get into a point where it's something that's bigger than you said, the $500 or whatever, the law or the way that the contract is written is if we can't come to terms on the inspection part of it, the deal is dead. The buyer gets his earnest money back and everybody parts ways. But from a negotiation standpoint, there's a lot of, let's say that somebody, and this is answering your question just in a sideways fashion. Let's somebody say that somebody's selling a house and they want it to be as is, but we're retaining the right for inspection naturally. Once that starts, you go under contract in a few days, 4 or 5 days, the inspection gets in. You take a day, you scrutinize it, then you tell the other side what's going on. Here's the deal. Even if it's as is, you say, look, it's under as is contract, but we found this and this and this, and so if you'll take care of these items, we'll move forward with the contract. If you won't, then we're out of here. And that's the only leverage you have, is if they got it, and this is a very telling thing, if they got the price they wanted, but they'll need to make some repairs, could be major, could be minimal. If they want to move forward, you know that they think they got a good deal and it's worth the hassle. Because otherwise, they get to start from scratch. And if they've looked at what the problems were, Tennessee state law, they now have to disclose those weaknesses for the house. They don't want to know. So the answer is, to your question, if you can't come to terms, you say, look, you're going to take care of it or we're walking. That's all it is. Does it reopen negotiations? I suppose in one way it does, but it's really a yes no question.
Well,
Not
yeah,
much
okay,
negotiating going on.
that makes sense because I've always wondered, like, okay, well, I'm going to ask for this, and with that market we would just come out of, if I go in there and ask for a light bulb, the builder says, "Well, he opened up negotiations. I'm canceling a contract, and I'm selling to somebody else."
No, it's a yes, no question. Can we work it out? Yes. Or am I walking? No. That's really what it is. Because once you get started down, if you get started down that path and it turns into like, I want 3 plug plates, not 2, an agent, really wise guy, really smart, great guy, Van Calhoun, good friend. He always told me that the spirit of the contract is if both sides want to close on some level, even if they're being prickly about things, it'll close. If
Yeah,
one side has decided they don't, they'll always find something wrong and it'll blow up no matter what you do. It was one of the wisest things I ever heard from him. So I think we've covered that pretty good. So the last one, we're running right on time. The last one is a home sale contingency. Those disappeared the last. A home sale click.
yeah.
You know, there'd be nothing to it. Did you have a lot of contracts that had to navigate that in the last year?
Yes. Oh yeah. We actually, as you know, we kind of come up with our own program for
Yep.
our local clients that basically removed all contingencies from the purchase contract. It turned the buyer into what, basically a cash buyer. We removed the financial contingency, and if the customer wanted to, and they had the documentable funds, they could remove the appraisal requirement as well, because if they say, okay, well, it comes in $200,000 low, I'm still going to buy it. So as long as we documented they had that money, we were doing that as well. So that for us, yes, we figured out a way to say F&M is coming to closing on the 15th with a big bunch of cash, and our
Like
customer is going to be there.
the sack of
So
money.
so it just took out all the contingencies for the customer. Uh, and that way if they felt comfortable in writing that offer, we could at least put them in the top of the stack as, you know, um,
They were
how
being
well.
treated. They would come across as a cash buyer. Is that what
We
you're
wanted
saying?
to, yeah, 100%. We guaranteed send a different approval letter signed by our operations person saying that we can close in X number of days. No ifs, ands, and buts about it.
And that allows the realtor to remove that financial contingency. Is that correct?
Correct. And they could, if the customer wanted, we could remove the appraisal contingency.
If you're a seller, you know what we're talking about. If you remove the financial contingency and the appraisal contingency, that is a good offer.
And of course, they weren't asking for home inspections or anything else. I don't even know if they got to see the property, but that was,
Yeah. Can we see a picture of an iPhone,
yeah,
an iPhone picture?
that was just sorry, I moved around my office and my light kicked on. So,
Oh. Um, so basically, what we'll say about the home sale contingencies is they're probably back. There's more of them now than there used to be. And all that means is I'll buy your house, but I need to sell mine in order to complete this deal. I'm not, I have an opinion on that. Probably should keep that to myself. But the home sale contingencies do exist. If you can avoid that, it is not a favorable thing for anybody looking at a contract to have a home sale contingency, because all of a sudden them selling your home is them selling their home is hooked to your wagon of you selling your home. And in these markets, in this day and age, meaning the current market, we have an intranet for our system, and there's a lot of agents that are like, where is everybody? This is there's homes are still being sold. Rodney's always very positive about that. Homes are still being sold. Loans are still being given, but not near the numbers. Meaning the lookers, the number of lookers is significantly less than what it was. Open house traffic lower. Um, I think that's it. I did want to address this one question by Angie here. It says, Can a person do their own inspection? The answer is yes. In Tennessee, you can. You can. But
Yeah.
if you find something that you're not comfortable with, it's the only way I can say this is it's got to be legit. It can't be because the driveway is scuffed or the front door squeaks. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I
If
mean,
you get
like,
it,
there's going to be somebody
let's
come
say
on here and say, "Yes, you can." Well, I know you can, but
right.
I have to when I'm doing a contract. The way I do it is every action that is taken, I pretend like is the decision I'm making now would it hold up if Rodney was the judge and I was standing in front of him. That's the way I make decisions, as if it were being judged in a court of law. So you just have to, if you do an inspection, make sure it's something that is legitimately you can't live with. So
Yeah, and if somebody wants to do their own, especially even if they have knowledge or not, um, they can always come back and ask for whatever they want. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get fixed, or they may miss a huge item, or But I think in Angie's case, wasn't didn't she have some experience with flipping homes and stuff,
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that? Yeah, her
yeah. There
husband's a
you go.
contractor.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that would be a perfect scenario for them to do that.
yep. And
You
I'm
know,
on board. I'm on board 100% with that. With, but when you see the question in general, I've seen a lot of people want to do their own inspection, and frankly, they had no business doing that. I mean,
right.
they're
I
putting the
know
fate.
experience in it. Yes.
Yeah, they're
You
putting
know,
the fate of their buyer, whoever it is, if it's their kid, because sometimes that's what will happen. Dad will come in and say, I'm not spending $400 for an inspection. I'll look at it for you."
yeah.
That's
They
what I'm
saved the
saying.
$400, but they missed a $10,000 electrical issue that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get it. I mean, yeah, I get it. But if you're knowledgeable, and as a buyer, you can always ask for anything. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. You
No,
know.
absolutely. And that's what negotiate. That's the whole point of the inspection process in Tennessee, and why I just think it changed a few years ago. I was so grateful because you can negotiate back and forth for as long as it takes until the deadline hits. If the
Hmm.
deadline hits and you've not got an agreement, terminated, out of here.
Yeah.
Or if you're asking for stuff and you don't respond, then you're buying it the way it is.
Right.
So just the deadlines are important. So I think that wraps it up. That we did good, Rodney. Thank you. That was the beginning. The opening was great with those rates, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, one question about you just talked about before you go. I have a client that's looking. To me, she's got one of the cheapest condos in Franklin,
Okay.
in Williamson County. Uh, to me, that would be an awesome property to have to sell if you're one of the cheapest in our county. And of course, she wants to sell before she buys.
Right.
Now, as a listing agent, you're looking at this contingency of her, a home sale contingency. Do you ever look up like, hey, is your house listed? Is what are you selling it for? Who's your agent? And would you take those considerations? Like if she listed it with a really good agent in our area and it was priced correctly, that thing is going to sell. I mean, it could be the worst market in the history of markets in Franklin, and that property will still sell, right?
Correct.
Um, what would be so to me? She lost out on a property this weekend. I was like, that's crazy over that home sale contingency. First of all, the house is 50 plus days listed. It's been they reduced the price 2 or 3 times now,
Right. The one
and
she's
I'm
looking at.
yes. And I'm
Yes.
like, they walked away. This seller walked away this weekend without a contract And I'm like, do you think they did their due diligence on what she had to sell, because she didn't get the contract, and her realtor is telling us he thinks it's because of that contingency. And I was just like, man, that house is going to sell.
But that's why you've hit the nail on the head. The seller has decided that a home sale contingency isn't worth the risk, and they'll wait
Yeah,
for
but
an offer that doesn't have
they've
one.
already waited 53 days. I mean,
I know.
they didn't even take a. I was like, well, did they offer a contingency kickout? Like, give me a 72-hour kickout clause. Like, if you find somebody without that contingency, and give me 72 hours to do something about it, and then kick me to the curb if you get a better offer. They wouldn't even do that. And then but the house is still being marketed today. They didn't get an offer on it this weekend.
Oh, is that-
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like I'd understand if they had 5 offers and one of them was better, but this house is
yeah.
still on the market this morning.
Yeah, see, it's in that particular case, and we didn't even get to it, but a kickout clause makes sense for anybody just watching. If you put a contract on something and you had a sale of home contingency, a kickout clause means that I, as the buyer, can give you 48 hours or 72 hours or whatever we've agreed to make good on that offer if a better offer comes to me. So you've made an offer, kickout clause is in existence. The second one comes that I like better, giving you 72 hours to remedy the kickout clause, get rid of it.
Right.
That's what
Yeah.
that's
To
for.
either get out of the way, or take that contingency away.
I think that in that particular case, include if it was a good if it was a good number for the seller, right? If it was a good number, include the kickout clause, and then continue to market as though it's not under contract.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I thought that would have been the worst case scenario. I wasn't. I was shocked that she's still looking, but you know,
Hmm. Yeah.
sellers are sellers. Everybody.
Well,
Everybody has their own opinion.
there's other reasons we'll talk offline.
Yeah.
Well, man. Anyway, so thank you for the numbers. We'll be doing those numbers every Monday at 1 o'clock. You can look forward to Rodney doing that. I think that's
Tuesdays.
great to know what to expect. So, anything
Tuesdays one
left to
o'clock.
add, buddy?
Tuesdays 1 o'clock.
What did I say?
Monday.
He is correct. It's Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. Yeah. Hey, thanks everybody, and we will talk to you next week at 1 o'clock. Rodney, see you later.
Adios, my man. Good to see you.
See you,
Thanks,
buddy.
Angie.
Bye. Bye.
See you.